Harry does have an interest elsewhere, and that you notice I say if, and I do so for legal reasons. And you also notice for legal reasons I haven't said that he's having an affair with this woman.
Meghan needed something. The week had gone so wrong for Harry, most notably the court case, because she would have been at the Invictus Games, I'm pretty sure, launch on Friday, if it had gone well.
Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's American dream is apparently officially over.
Now it's just completely chaotic, and I'm scared for his future, to be quite honest. It just seems like a rough shot. We don't know what is going to happen.
Invictus Games organisers delighted that one Meghan Markle didn't show up for the big one-year countdown in Birmingham.
It's absolutely appalling. He doesn't know, and how can he make a judgment like that? I mean, the Justice Nicklin is a very well-known, careful.
She couldn't even just show up to be in the background, to not make a fuss, to just be low maintenance.
It has been said, chums, from an excellent source, that Meghan Markle actually now ponders what was the whole point of that, very private expedition over to the United Kingdom.
Harry just is unable to do at this point because he's so wrapped up in Meghan's.
Everything seemed to start unraveling fast. Meghan reportedly came across text messages that raised serious questions, and to some viewers, it made it look like Harry may have been planning this situation for months. But then the story took another unexpected turn. New claims have also linked him, at least in online discussion, to several controversies over the years, which led some people to argue that he may not have been just a victim in all of this, but possibly someone with a much bigger role than first assumed.
And you also notice, for legal reasons, I haven't said that he's having an affair with this woman, nor have I said that he's having a post-marital or anything affair with this woman.
This story could completely shift the way some people look at both of them. Here is what is being claimed about how it all supposedly began. It started with something small. A phone was sitting on the table, then a notification popped up, and it appeared to be just another message from an unknown contact. Most people probably would have brushed it off, but Meghan reportedly did not. She picked up the phone, checked the screen, and began reading. What she allegedly came across left her stunned. It was not just one message or a few random chats. According to the claims, there were months of conversations with a woman, including personal discussions, talk about future plans, and messages about how life might look differently one day. Some of the texts reportedly even mentioned a time when he hoped for more freedom and a fresh start in his life, based on these unverified claims.
It's a surprise and not a surprise, because we knew things weren't going well, but to finally have even more confirmation of how badly things are going, even more confirmation of how badly Harry wants back in, just goes to show and prove that Harry and Meghan leaving was a massive mistake, probably led by Meghan, that Harry really didn't consider. And as they get to Hollywood, they're finding out that, well, maybe the industry is interested in you for a couple of moments here and there.
The messages reportedly painted a very different picture. To some people following the story, they seemed to suggest someone who may have emotionally checked out long before anything became public. According to people said to be close to the situation, these were not being framed as random conversations or harmless mix-ups. Instead, the claims suggested they were intentional, carefully timed, and thought out over a longer period of time. And that is exactly why the online reaction got so intense. Once those claims started circulating, people began rereading the whole situation through a different lens, wondering whether the timing, the wording, and the private back and forth all pointed to something bigger. Critics online said it no longer looked like a simple misunderstanding, while others pushed back and said the details were still unverified and being discussed far ahead of any official confirmation. That split is what kept the story moving, because every new comment seemed to add another layer of doubt, and every new reaction made people question what had really been going on behind the scenes.
It got out from friends and relations and supporters of the royal family, who knew exactly what was happening while it was happening and after it had happened, and have opened their mouths.
Based on the claims being shared around this story, he was allegedly spending time with another woman during periods when Meghan believed he was tied up in meetings. At the same time, he was said to be encouraging her to keep working on the marriage, to keep showing up for public appearances, and to keep presenting the relationship as solid. Those allegations immediately drew more attention online. Supporters of that version of events say the private side of things was kept carefully apart from his public image. What made the claims land even harder, according to online discussion, was the woman's identity. She was not being described as some random person from a brief encounter, but as someone well-known in Montecito, close to his age, and someone he had reportedly known for a long time. The same claims suggest she was already familiar with parts of his social circle and understood his situation. Lady C was among the early commentators to speak about the allegations publicly, saying they lined up with what was reportedly found on the phone.
As I said a day or two ago, I don't remember exactly when I said it, it's a rerun of the whole Charles and Diana saga, where Diana was leaking like a sieve by Paul Dacre's own account and Richard Kay's and the late David English's at the time. She leaked to the press with a facility that only Harry and Meghan have been able to employ. And Charles would tell all his friends and relations, don't say a thing, keep your mouth shut.
According to reports and the surrounding commentary, Harry was allegedly involved in something that went beyond a brief connection. The claims describe it as an ongoing romantic relationship, with conversations that reportedly touched on future plans and what life might look like down the line. Those same reports say Meghan was deeply shaken after learning about the alleged messages. Instead of keeping it to herself, she reportedly confronted him and wanted answers right away. Who is this woman? How long has this been going on? Why? How could you do this? The questions reportedly came one after another as emotions were running high.
These situations are always extremely unpredictable, and Harry and Meghan's relationship was always very volatile. And now that there is this new introduction conversationally, now that Harry has found someone evidently with whom he can discuss philosophy and the relative merits of Kant versus Schopenhauer, of course, Meghan's not going to be pleased, but evidently she's hanging in there.
According to the claims being discussed, his reported response only seemed to heighten the tension because he allegedly did not give a direct denial. Other reports suggest he also did not come forward with any major apology or openly ask for forgiveness. Instead, some accounts describe him as acting like Meghan was overreacting or as if her concerns were not fully justified. And according to those reports, that may have been what hurt her most, not just the alleged relationship itself, but the impression of a lack of empathy, accountability, or respect for what they had built together. And that is why the conversation kept getting bigger online. Once people started focusing on the alleged lack of a clear denial, the whole situation began to feel even more uneasy to viewers who were following every detail. Some users argued that the silence around the claims made the story look more complicated, while others said the discussion was running far ahead of anything that had actually been raised as a question. That divide mattered because it shifted the focus from gossip to character, and that is where the reaction really sharpened. Instead of just asking what happened, people were now questioning what the tone of the exchange suggested, how much was being hidden, and whether the public version of the relationship matched the private one at all. Online commentators kept pointing to the same idea, that the real tension was not only about the alleged messages, but about how the situation was handled once the questions came out. And as those reactions kept building, the story stopped looking like a single moment and started looking like a much broader pattern in the eyes of the internet.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Harry is just living in a fantasy world. He really is. He thinks he is someone who knows what he's talking about. He is the furthest person from any truth that I know, because he just lives in a life that is not even living on the same planet, because he thinks it's all about how he feels.
But here is the part a lot of people say gets missed. Supporters of these claims argue that the alleged affair should not be treated like a separate incident. In their view, it is tied to a much larger pattern of controversies that have been debated for years. Whether that reading is fair is still a matter of public discussion, but the allegations have definitely sparked strong reactions online. As the story spread across social media, one comment started getting a lot of attention. It reportedly pulled in around 2,300 likes, and many people pointed to that number as a sign of how split the public had become. If she had fabricated those pregnancy claims, then Harry too would have been seen by some as involved. And as a prince, he too has been described by some users as deeply troubling in this context. Some users took the likes as proof that plenty of people agreed with that view, while others quickly reminded everyone that social media reactions do not confirm whether any claim is actually true.
And I'm making sure I don't say it for legal reasons, but you can draw your own conclusions. Two adults who are supposedly in love and in their 40s. Well, of course, what do? They certainly wouldn't do anything but speak about Schopenhauer. Of course, that's what they do. And Harry, being so well-educated and so knowledgeable and so esoteric and so intellectual, he's certainly not going to be speaking about defecation or any of the other basic acts that people and animals get up to as their urges ensnare them. No. Harry's far too elevated for all of that.
Why does that matter? Because, according to some commentators, it pushes back against the idea that Harry was simply swept up in events he could not control. They argue that if the claims about an ongoing relationship were true, it would point to his own choices being involved, rather than him being completely guided by someone else. That reading is still just an opinion, but it has turned into a major debate online. People who support that theory often bring up the timeline. They say that in early 2022, rumors started circulating about a new woman in Harry's life. Around that same time, online discussions also began questioning public appearances and official announcements, with some users pointing to details they thought seemed unusual. According to those reports, the alleged relationship later seemed to become more serious, with claims of additional messages, more meetings, and a growing level of coordination over time.
Will Megsy Baby be in the driving seat if she has a weakened position and she has secrets that she doesn't want revealed? I just ask those questions out of intellectual interest.
Interest did not stop there, because the financial side of the story quickly entered the discussion too. Some online reports and commentators began pointing to claims tied to Invictus finances, including allegations that millions of dollars may not have been fully accounted for, plus speculation around sponsors, business partnerships, and media deals. Those claims are still disputed, and there is no confirmed public evidence backing the broader accusations being floated online. Even so, supporters of that theory insist these moments are not separate incidents, but pieces of a much bigger pattern that has been argued about for years. And to them, the roughly 2,300 likes on that viral comment were not just a number, they were seen as a sign that many viewers believed Harry was making his own decisions, rather than simply being guided by someone else. That is exactly why the conversation has stayed so intense online, because people were not just reacting to one rumor, they were reading the whole situation as part of a larger story. Once that happens, every new detail starts to carry more weight, and even small choices get pulled into the debate. For some viewers, the biggest issue was not only what was being claimed, but how quickly the public discussion moved from questions to assumptions. They felt the timeline, the messages, and the surrounding commentary all created a picture that seemed hard to ignore, even though none of it has been officially confirmed. Others pushed back just as hard, saying the internet was filling in blanks that may never actually be proven. That back and forth is what keeps the topic alive. The more people argue over what the silence means, the more the story becomes about interpretation instead of hard facts. And in a case like this, that distinction matters because online reactions can spread much faster than any verified answer. So even without clear confirmation, the debate continues to grow. Supporters of the theory keep pointing to the same pattern, while critics keep warning that social media is treating speculation like evidence. That split is exactly what gives the story its staying power, and why people are still picking apart every angle with so much intensity.
He writes, Prince Harry arrived in Birmingham without Meghan Markle by his side, and insiders tell Naughty But Nice that behind the scenes, some Invictus Games organisers quietly welcomed the last-minute change. Meghan had been expected to attend the one-year countdown celebration, but pulled out just days before the event. Harry ultimately flew solo, and sources say his solo appearance made for a smoother, more relaxed day. There was a sense of relief backstage, one insider said. When Harry comes alone, the focus stays exactly where he wants it, on the veterans, not on the media frenzy that can surround a royal couple. Everyone could relax and let the event shine.
Supporters of these theories say that keeping several major secrets in place at once would have taken careful planning and steady choices over time. In their view, the claims tied to public image, finances, and personal relationships all point to a wider pattern that cannot be brushed aside so easily. At the same time, those claims remain heavily disputed and have not been established as fact. Still, according to multiple commentators and unnamed sources mentioned in reports, Harry was not just reacting to events as they happened. They suggest he may have been involved in shaping how certain situations were presented, making his own decisions, and helping influence the public narrative, at least in the eyes of those following the story online.
For Meghan, it's achieved what she wants. It's once again re-established and maybe not been seen, but we read the news story, that they're still part of the royal family. And that, I think, is what people find.
Oh, she didn't want to be part of the royal family. She called them racists and everything else.
But Brand Sussex is entirely dependent on some sort of association. Hence the reason why when you see all her packaging for her as ever.
In the version of the story circulating online, those alleged text messages became a real turning point for Meghan. People backing that narrative say it shifted how she saw everything, and some commentators then argued that Harry may not have been just caught up in events, but could have played a more active role than he was first given credit for. That is also when the earlier online debates about pregnancy claims started popping back up again after the alleged affair took over the conversation. Viewers who had been following these controversies said older questions, ones that had mostly faded from public attention, were suddenly being pulled back into the spotlight alongside the newer allegations. None of those claims have been independently verified. Still, as the discussion spread across social media, many women began sharing their own experiences with pregnancy and childbirth, which added even more attention to the topic. Supporters of the theory pointed to the volume of comments as proof that the issue was clearly striking a nerve with a lot of people.
Many people do not believe that the children exist, but the children do exist. I've said it all along. People say, oh, they're hired in. Whether Meghan is crazy enough, and I'm not saying she's not crazy enough, to try to confuse the issue by sometimes hiring actors to enact the roles of the children is beside the point. The children exist. You don't believe that they were born of her body? I suspect millions of people share your belief.
One comment quickly became hard to ignore, pulling in nearly 1,000 likes. It said, "Any woman who has had a baby knows she was never pregnant with Harry's children." That single remark brought an old controversy right back into the spotlight, even though many people thought it had already faded away. Supporters of that theory pointed to what they saw as inconsistencies. They argued that the timeline did not seem to line up, that her physical appearance appeared to shift in ways they found unusual, and that certain public appearances did not match the story they had been told. To them, those details were not random at all. They felt they pointed to something much bigger. But the bigger question was not only about Meghan, it was about Harry. If any part of the story was not what it seemed, many commenters believed he would have known from the very start. Whether people were talking about a surrogate, questions around the young individuals involved, or something else entirely, the theory suggested he was not just an uninformed bystander. You do not simply end up tied to something that significant by accident. You do not introduce young individuals to the world without understanding the circumstances around them, and you do not take on the legal and public responsibilities of fatherhood without knowing what is happening behind the scenes. And that is why the conversation keeps stretching on, because once people start treating one claim as connected to a bigger pattern, every small detail suddenly feels loaded. What might have been a passing rumor gets pulled back into the center of the debate, and the internet starts reading meaning into almost everything. That is also where the tone online becomes so divided. Some viewers insist the clues line up in a way that is impossible to ignore, while others keep saying the entire discussion is built on assumptions that have not been verified. So instead of one clear version of events, the story becomes a clash between speculation and pushback, with each side using the same details to support a very different conclusion. And as long as that tension stays unresolved, the reaction will keep growing. People are not just reacting to what was said, they are reacting to what they think it all might mean. And that is exactly what keeps this kind of controversy alive.
Since it is apparent that something highly irregular happened, and since it is apparent that the highly irregular happenings emanated from Meghan Markle herself, and since it is obvious that Meghan Markle has shown herself to be deeply divisive and malicious, and that she will sacrifice anyone and their well-being or their interests so to achieve her objectives, which are either attention or enrichment.
Some people online have gone as far as saying Harry understood everything and still chose to go along with it. In that version of events, he stood by the narrative, defended it in public, and kept repeating the same account even as more questions started piling up. As the speculation grew, viewers began pointing to what they believed were inconsistencies. Some argued that the timeline did not quite add up, while others felt several details needed a much clearer explanation. Instead of directly addressing those rumors, Harry stayed mostly quiet. That silence only pushed the debate further, with critics reading it as a way to avoid giving the controversy even more attention. At the same time, the alleged affair was developing behind the scenes, turning into a separate issue that only made the situation feel even more complicated. The contrast between the two issues became hard to miss. The pregnancy rumors were met with silence, while the affair story eventually spread far beyond anyone's control. Supporters of the theory said one controversy could be managed through privacy, legal pressure, and careful messaging, but the other had become too public to keep out of sight. According to that version of events, the difference in how each situation played out said more than any official statement ever could.
The faking of the pregnancies, either of those is truly detrimental to any possible respect and any possible regard that any responsible person could have for any public figure who behaved in such a destructive way and who went to the lengths to create a miasma of doubt the way she has created it.
But then there was someone else. Unlike the rumors and unanswered questions from before, this was a real person whose presence could not just be brushed aside. Someone who could talk, make choices, and potentially change the entire situation without warning. In that moment, the older controversies suddenly did not seem like Harry's main problem anymore. Instead, the theory claims he turned his attention somewhere else. The pregnancy rumors slipped into the background while he seemed focused on what looked like an escape from the life he had built. In that version of events, the new relationship stood for something bigger, a possible chance to start fresh and leave the past behind. Then came Meghan's realization. As she allegedly went through the messages, she supposedly understood something she had not fully faced before, that she was not as irreplaceable as she had believed. The young people, regardless of how they entered the story, still remained tied to Harry through legal responsibilities and the line of royal succession. But Meghan herself was different. She reportedly came to feel that Harry had already moved on emotionally, long before anyone else noticed it.
Said the drama before the low-key family meeting was quite the media whirlwind. So it's talking about Harry and Meghan meeting with the king. As I just revealed in these pages 3 weeks ago, on the condition of the reconciliation were that there be no cameras in the room, no briefings, and no Instagram posts about jam or anything else. So Meghan, poor dear, was prevented from posting some more abysmal content on her abysmal Instagram. To these strictures, and apparently humbled Harry agreed in a heartbeat, and he has been good as his word. So this again lets me know, and this is what I posited before, that Harry being the one who bended the knee in this particular situation.
That is where the situation gets even more complicated. The theory suggests that after seeing the messages, Meghan may have wanted to walk away, leave the relationship behind, start fresh, and put as much distance between herself and Harry as possible. But in this version of the story, walking away was never as simple as it sounded. Everything she had spent years building was now tied to her public image. The titles, the recognition, and the image people connected with her had become much more than just symbols. In the online discussion, those things were seen as the foundation of her career, her influence, and what came next. So the argument was no longer only about the marriage itself, it was about everything attached to it, the status, the public profile, and the opportunities that came with that identity. That is what made the choice feel so much heavier from the outside, because those pieces had become deeply connected to the life she had built. And that is why the reaction did not just fade out, it kept spreading into every corner of the discussion. Once people started linking private drama, public image, and long-running rumors together, the whole story began to feel bigger than any single headline. Some viewers treated that as a sign that more was going on behind the scenes, while others said the entire conversation was still running on speculation and incomplete details. That split is exactly what kept the online debate so intense. On one side, commenters were reading every new detail as proof that the situation had been building for a long time. On the other, people were pushing back hard, saying the public was jumping to conclusions without any official confirmation. So the same silence, the same messages, and the same public tension ended up getting interpreted in completely different ways. And once that happens, the narrative gets harder to control. The focus moves away from what can actually be verified and shifts toward what people think the silence might mean, or what they believe the timing suggests. That is when a private dispute turns into a public obsession, because every new reaction gives the internet another reason to keep digging. What makes it even more complicated is that, in this version of the discussion, the stakes are not just emotional. They are tied to image, access, and the kind of public identity that can shape everything that comes next. So the conversation keeps circling back to one question, not just what happened, but who had the most to lose if the story kept unfolding in public.
Prince Harry, not for the first time, has displayed little sense of the gravity of his words and actions. There will now be hearings as to costs, which could result in a sizable financial burden on claimants. Furthermore, in impugning the integrity of a member of the British judiciary, the Duke of Sussex has smeared the very legal system that is administered in the name of the Crown, although independent in its operations under the authority of his father. This is regrettably part of a pattern. Although often professing a desire to escape from the royal drama, Prince Harry appears addicted to generating it.
Meghan, according to this theory, may have felt caught between two equally painful choices. The first was to walk away. In that version of the story, that would have meant giving up the life she spent years building, along with the public identity, prestige, and platform that opened so many doors for her. The idea is that she may have worried that stepping back would also mean watching opportunities fade and seeing her carefully crafted image come apart in full view of the public. The second choice was to stay, keep showing up beside Harry, smile through appearances, and act like everything was still normal while privately carrying the weight of a relationship that, in this version of events, had already broken down. Every public appearance would turn into another act, and every headline would serve as a fresh reminder of what she believed she had lost. Neither path offered a real win. One meant sacrificing the life she had created, while the other meant protecting it at the cost of her own happiness. According to the theory, that impossible choice became the real turning point in the story.
It's ruining others now, P. Diner, because the Doreen Lawrence thing is really interesting, right? Because
Her son was murdered, so a lot of people have a huge amount of sympathy for her. And so Harry knows that, and I believe for PR reasons, nothing more. He's briefed, oh, well, don't worry, Doreen Lawrence isn't going to have to pay. So look at this, an exclusive with sources close to Harry saying he is protective. This is an exclusive to The Guardian, protective of the social campaign and will not see her out of pocket.
Meghan ultimately, in this version of events, is said to have chosen the second path. The idea is that she may have accepted the relationship was effectively over, yet still kept presenting a united front to the public. From there, keeping up appearances became part of the cost she may have felt she had to pay. The theory goes even further, suggesting Harry may have understood exactly why she could have felt unable to walk away. Because of that, some online discussion claims he no longer appeared to fear the consequences of his choices. In that telling, he kept building a separate life, exchanged private messages, made plans outside the marriage, and acted as if the relationship had already reached its end, believing there was very little Meghan could realistically do to stop him. That, in turn, would have completely shifted the balance of power. Meghan's biggest achievement, becoming a globally recognized royal figure, also became her biggest vulnerability. The very identity she worked so hard to build was now, according to this story, the same thing keeping her from leaving. The titles, the prestige, and the public image that once signaled success slowly started to feel more like a trap of their own making. What once lifted her up, in the eyes of this theory, eventually became the very reason she may have felt she could not simply walk away.
The fact it has happened, and the fact it has happened publicly, and the fact that neither she nor Harry has ever provided the actual evidence to clear up the doubts that she, and to a lesser extent he, created as a result of their conduct, is particularly damning, and therefore people...
Meghan had apparently built so much of her public identity around becoming a royal figure that, in this version of the story, it started to feel like there was no real life outside of it. From that perspective, walking away no longer looked like a practical choice, because she seemed to believe there was simply too much on the line. The theory says her emotional breaking point was not just tied to the alleged affair. It was also about realizing she felt stuck in a relationship that no longer seemed to be working, while believing that leaving would mean giving up everything she had spent years trying to create. That realization, according to the discussion, left her feeling powerless for the first time. But the story still does not stop there. Commentators arguing this angle say that the relationship drama was only one part of a much larger picture. Beneath all the emotional tension, some supporters point to what they believe was an even bigger issue: money. One number keeps coming up again and again in the conversation: $54 million. In that account, the amount is alleged to have gone missing from Invictus-related finances, and online speculation has centered on where the money went and whether the full explanation has ever been made public. Those financial questions are then presented as the thread that supposedly ties the rest of the puzzle together. And that is exactly why the conversation refuses to die down. Once money gets pulled into the same storyline as private tension and public image, people stop treating it like a simple relationship dispute and start looking for a much larger pattern. Some online commenters believe that is where the real pressure began, while others keep warning that none of these pieces should be treated as settled fact. What makes the reaction so persistent is that every new claim seems to open another layer instead of closing the case. The public is not just reacting to one message or one moment, it is reacting to the idea that there may have been separate motives running at the same time. That is why the discussion keeps shifting, from personal fallout to financial questions, to whether certain choices were made for appearances, protection, or something else entirely. At that point, even the smallest detail starts to feel loaded. A private exchange can suddenly be read as evidence, a public silence can be framed as a strategy, and an unresolved number can become the center of the entire debate. None of that has official confirmation, but the internet rarely waits for certainty before building its own version of events. So the story keeps growing because people are not only asking what happened, they are asking what it all means. And once a narrative reaches that stage, every new reaction matters, because it can either calm the discussion down or push it even further into speculation. The relationship drama is only one part of a much bigger crisis. This theory suggests Harry's finances may have been slipping behind the scenes, even while the public was shown a polished version of life. In this version of events, major business deals allegedly did not bring in the level of success people once expected. Revenue is said to have slowed, expenses kept rising, and maintaining a high-profile lifestyle became harder and harder. The costs of security, luxury living, and keeping up a global public image are described as putting steady pressure on their money. Supporters of this narrative also point to growing questions around Invictus-related finances. They say veterans, financial observers, and investigators have been asking where certain funds went and whether every transaction has been properly accounted for. Harry's limited public response only adds to the speculation. Then, according to the theory, another woman enters the picture. Her arrival changes the entire conversation. What first looked like a relationship scandal starts getting tied to money, motive, and what may really be happening behind the scenes. Everything starts to move faster once the financial strain is said to have reached a breaking point. The theory then raises a very pointed question about the timing, asking whether all of this is just a coincidence. Did the alleged affair begin right as Harry's money troubles were becoming harder to ignore, or was the relationship itself, according to online speculation, part of a larger attempt to step away from those problems? Supporters of that narrative point to a string of setbacks, business deals that allegedly fell short of expectations, rising expenses, heavier public scrutiny, and a brand that no longer seemed to deliver the success it once promised. Then, in this version of the story, another woman enters the picture. She is not described as just a new romantic interest. Instead, the theory frames her as someone who represented stability, opportunity, and, most importantly, financial security. The alleged relationship is presented less like a love story and more like a calculated move by someone looking for a way out. The narrative goes even further, claiming Meghan eventually reached the same conclusion. As she allegedly read the messages, she reportedly believed Harry was not looking for someone he loved more. He was looking for someone who could offer a more secure future. In this telling, the affair was not about romance at all, but about survival, ambition, and the hope of escaping mounting financial pressure. That realization cuts even deeper than the alleged betrayal itself. It is not being framed as just about another woman, but about Meghan feeling replaced by someone who, in this theory, appeared to offer greater financial security. Commentators pushing this angle say the moment did more than shake the marriage, it also rattled the image she had spent years building, leaving her questioning everything she thought her future would look like. And that is why people keep dissecting every little move. Once a story gets framed around trust, money, and private tension all at once, the discussion rarely stays simple for long. Online, viewers start connecting dots whether those questions are raised or not, and that is exactly what keeps this narrative alive. Some commenters say the most powerful part of the whole conversation is the uncertainty itself. With no official confirmation on the more dramatic claims, every new reaction becomes part of the storyline, and every silence gets read in a different way. That kind of ambiguity gives the internet room to build theories, even when the facts behind them remain disputed. So the backlash does not just come from what was said, it comes from what people think was left unsaid. And as long as those questions keep hanging in the air, the speculation is likely to keep circling back to the same central issue: what was really going on behind the polished public image. Once the story started circulating publicly, the reaction online was immediate, and very different from what a lot of people expected. Instead of only focusing on Meghan, much of the conversation quickly shifted to the mystery around the alleged new woman. One widely shared comment said, "Can't believe there's a woman on the planet who would want to get involved in this mess." Reactions like that seem to show more disbelief than sympathy. The theory suggests that many online observers saw the whole situation as far too tangled for anyone to walk into casually. From that angle, the alleged relationship was linked in online discussion to financial pressure, public criticism, legal complications, and a marriage that was already under constant scrutiny. People started asking what anyone could possibly gain by stepping into something like that. Other comments turned the focus back to Harry himself. Some described him as immature, entitled, and unwilling to take responsibility for the situation around him. Many viewers pushed back on the idea that he should be seen as the victim, arguing instead that he shared equal responsibility for everything that had unfolded. That became the major shift in the discussion. The conversation was no longer just about taking sides or placing blame on one person. Instead, supporters of the theory said Harry and Meghan were both responsible for the choices that brought them to this point. In their view, that realization changed the way the entire story was being talked about. As the story kept spreading, thousands of people online weighed in with their own opinions. A lot of commenters argued that, if the allegations were true, Harry should be held accountable for his own choices, saying he was not just swept up by events, but may have played an active part. Others pushed back hard, which made it clear just how split public opinion had become. Those social media reactions reflected how people felt, but they did not prove the claims as fact. At the same time, William reportedly chose not to respond publicly. For many observers, that silence became its own storyline. While speculation kept building around Harry and Meghan, William largely stayed out of the debate, and some commentators believe that low-key approach may have helped reinforce his public image. Others read it differently, but his decision not to engage definitely got attention. And now the big question is, what happens next? Will Meghan choose a different path? Or will the couple keep facing these pressures together? Will the palace say anything meaningful? Or will the silence just continue? Only time will tell, and new developments could shift the conversation once again. If you've been following this story and the questions around Harry, Meghan, and the silence surrounding it all, make sure to like, subscribe, share this with others keeping up with the discussion, and comment with your own prediction. The next update could easily bring another unexpected turn, so see you on the next one.